This meeting is being live streamed. I think we are now live. Hello, Facebook.
Hello,
I'm Lea
Facebook.
Jovy-Ford, the COO of Omnis Education, and I am with Sharon Hurley Hall, who is our team lead of the diversity. I have completely forgotten.
Equity and belonging.
That's it. Team. And we are here to talk about something that both Sharon and I are very passionate about personally and professionally with Omnis, which is decolonizing education. So we're going to talk about what that is, why it matters, why it might matter to you, and how we are doing it at Omnis. Sharon, do you want to kick off by talking about kind of when we talk about what is decolonizing education, what does that mean? What are we talking about when we use those words?
Yeah, well, first of all, Lea, you need to think about what education looks like now, which is basically it's an education system that generally tells you what to think. It's based on narrow perspectives, and it doesn't really take account of learners' interests at all. And, you know, it's said often that history is written by the victors, and you get a partial narrative, often by a single voice. And that voice is usually the voice of a white European man or a country run by white European men. And so much is left out and so much is hidden. And those narratives underpin much of our education system. So, you know, and the system that we have doesn't usually encourage us to dig deeper. You know, there's so many stories that aren't told that deserve to be. And so decolonizing education is about bringing those to the fore. And I read a couple of quotes that really spoke to me. Rowena Arshad from the University of Edinburgh said that to decolonize is not about deleting knowledge or histories that have been developed in the West or colonial nations. It is to situate the histories and knowledges that don't originate from the West in the context of imperialism, colonialism, and power, and to consider why these have been marginalized and decentered.
I think that's so key, because what we often get, the argument that we get from people is, but you're wanting to erase white history, you're wanting to erase that side of the story. And that's not what that is at all. It's what's happening is we're presented with this, and actually there's all of this around here that is never pushed to the fore, and it's never seen as kind of equal, and it's never shared and presented at the same time.
Well,
and just because you're telling one story doesn't mean that other stories can't also be told as well.
Yes, and you know, really there's no such thing as white history. There's only history. It's just that it tends to feature, you know, it features white people a lot because those are the people that are telling the stories. And so I also read recently an African professor, Zodwa Motsa, said that you should accept that as an individual, you're immersed in a mono-narrative of Western knowledge and culture, and must admit that there are other equally viable narratives that are currently not part of your experience. So decolonizing education is about telling all those stories, reflecting those perspectives that are often hidden, and thinking about why they are hidden. You know, giving a little more critical thinking to our education, and also about letting people speak with their own voices, so that we're hearing those stories from the people who are affected by and who know about them, and centering the voices of the historically and currently marginalized, oppressed, and regularly excluded all year round. This is important to me, all year round, not just when there happens to be a particular holiday or observance.
Yeah. One of the things that people also question and query when we talk, not just we, but when one talks about decolonizing education and bringing some of these other narratives to the fore, is it comes from a place, I think, of kind of threat, but it's, you know, why does it matter? Why should we do this? How are we going to benefit from that?
Yeah, well, a really good question, Lea, because, you know, we all want to be well-rounded people. We want people to have, and we want our children to have, and our learners at Omnis to have a well-rounded view of the world, and to be able to make up their mind about what matters to them based on all the information, not just a limited worldview with a particular agenda. And so the acceptance that we live in this big world, that there are people who look different, who have different experiences and have different stories, can help people to develop as individuals, develop that sense of individuality rather than fall into collective thinking. It encourages learners and people and children and all of us to think for themselves, to take in a wide range of viewpoints and really decide for themselves what matters and what's important. And also as part of that, to be able to change their minds as new information comes to light, right? That also helps with growth, with progressive thinking, and moving away from that dogmatism that characterizes most of the educational systems that we would have grown up with, and towards a more progressive, more growth-oriented, better informed system, better informed type of thinking that creates individuality and also enables the people who are getting that information to make change to help create the world that they want to live in. Right? Yeah. I have an example. Just a very short example.
I think it'd be really useful, actually, when we're talking about, I remember when we had the previous model of learning blocks, and we had, I think it was one of the blocks that you created, and it was about Black Wall Street, and you had two or three different examples of, we've been presented with one version of history or one version and one narrative, but actually there was, is it Central Park as well? I think there's Wall Street and Central Park. They all have another, more than one history and more than one background, but those stories aren't told.
We definitely don't hear about the fact that there was Seneca Village before there was Central Park, and that the Black people who lived there and Indigenous people who lived there were just cleared away like so much rubbish in order to make room for it. And we don't hear about Black Wall Street, which, the white elite at the time was very threatened by, because Black people were succeeding. And that was basically, again, cleared away. I think they were, they burned it down, they got rid of it completely. And, even take something like Christopher Columbus, right? How many times do we learn, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and learn what a good thing that was. But, we like to encourage learners to dig deeper and think about, what are the other aspects of that voyage? What about the disease? What about how the people that discovered Columbus sailing into their country really felt about it, right? Yeah. How can you actually discover something that's already there, in fact? And that's one common example, but there's a lot of hidden history, and decolonizing education is about bringing all of that to light so that people have a more complete view of what happened.
It's context, it's adding additional context, because
absolutely,
we can't, we can make decisions about how to do things better or differently when we have fuller and richer and broader context. And if we just have one side of the story, it is just one side of the story. We get the Christopher Columbus kind of triumphantly sailing in and discovering these new lands. And actually there's a whole, multitude of other sides of the stories, as you said, of the people who were there already. Yes. And how did they, and what impact was there on, and even the interaction between the two types of people, and, the two kind of groups of people meeting, what actually happened. And we learn about one side only, and that doesn't give us full context to make up our own minds and decisions about, what did that look like? What did that feel like?
Yes, and how does that affect how we want to move through the world today? Are those the kinds of experiences and narratives that we want to be perpetuating, or are they not? I mean, we know what the answer should be to that. But, learners who get the context and the information are then able to have a more holistic view and to make up their minds accordingly.
Yeah, you've touched on it already, because again, I think the pushback is often, but how does this benefit, how does this benefit my white child to learn about what happened to the Black people in history and the brown people whose countries were colonized? What does it, what difference does it make to them?
It makes them better informed individuals. It makes them people who can think as individuals about what happens. Then they have the information, they can make their own mind. It encourages them to grow and develop. It encourages progressive thinking. It encourages a different worldview that is more in keeping with how the world actually is, rather than how a narrow subsection of people would like to present it. And how can how can being better informed be a bad thing?
And and I think one of the things that it does is also invite and encourage possibly more and greater acceptance Because if we have all sides of the story from the beginning, we are right from the start encouraged to accept that all of these different narratives exist and all of these different experiences exist and all of these different truths exist, and that it facilitates, just kind of by its very nature, acceptance that this happens and that there isn't just one truth.
Exactly. And it's very important, as as we live in a world that has all these varied people with all these varied backgrounds, to know that there's not just one narrative, and to know that, for example, the history of the Black people you see every day did not start with enslavement, for example. To learn that there were rich indigenous cultures before the Mayflower. To learn that, the Mayans were building great temples and learning to tell time and doing calendars that are still accurate before Columbus ended up there. All that context is important for how you see the world.
Yeah, and I think what we have currently today, and not just in education, but we have a very in the Western world, we have a very pick and mix approach of kind of cultural appropriation, and we will pick and choose yoga, and we will pick and choose various different practices from different cultures and different histories because we've seen some benefits, and often they're the kind of what we perceive maybe as quick fix benefits, but we don't understand them in the deeper context or historical context of where they've come from, and the kind of narratives and backgrounds of where those cultures have developed themselves, and that it leads us to a much more fractured view and experience of the world around us.
Exactly. And sometimes we just have no idea, about the importance of certain things, the significance of certain practices, of certain events, of certain cultures even. And it's important to know. It is important to know that as we move through the world. We're living in a world that is, it's global. People are traveling, people are going to different places. And as you move through the world, it's important to understand more about that world and those cultures so that you can situate yourself in them, so you can appreciate what needs to be appreciated, so that your knowledge base is broad and wide and in depth.
And you can find the commonalities and you can find the points of connection because you also understand the points of difference.
Exactly.
So when you have the wider context, you can see where the similarities exist and you can see where the differences exist, and those, that facilitates and allows connection as opposed to division.
Exactly. Really, really important. I think there are so many benefits to this, just in terms of being good people, being better people,
Yeah. So let's talk about kind of Omnis and what we're doing at Omnis, because we talk a lot about our commitment to diversity, equity, and belonging. We talk about our commitment to anti-racism. We talk about our approach to decolonizing education. Let's talk a little bit more in kind of specifics. What are we actually doing?
Yeah. So a lot of it, I think, starts with asking questions of ourselves as we start to prepare resources. Are there other perspectives and bodies of knowledge that we're not drawing on, and why are we not drawing on? I know that a lot of the work that we do is about how can we make sure that we are reflecting those diverse perspectives, that, if we're talking about something that happened in a particular country, we're not just taking the perspective of white Westerners on what happened. We're trying to find perspectives that emanate from within the country, right? Why we ask questions about why it's so difficult to find certain perspectives, and what can we do about it? And we dig deep. I mean, sometimes it takes a long time to find those resources so that we are getting those additional perspectives.
We have an entire team of who I would now call professionals and experts, because they've been doing this for months now, who are exceptional curators, and they know where to look. And if they can't find something, they keep looking, and we work as a team to find the diversity of voices. And then we have another team, which is your team, who checks for the diversity across all the things, not just race and not just skin color.
Yeah.
And we also have a quality assurance team who also do another level of checks. So we have so many checks and balances of, are we presenting as many sides and perspectives as possible?
And of course, that starts right at the beginning with the guidance for the curation team that says, make sure that you're looking for the different perspectives. Make sure that we're not just taking a one-sided narrative. And as you say, I mean, they do great work on putting together really diverse resources. We're always asking ourselves, is there a way to widen the perspectives that we bring to learners? Is there a way also to go with some non-traditional sources? Okay, so it's not just about writing, here's an essay on this. Can we bring in somebody's, can we bring in a podcast? Can we bring in a social media account where somebody's sharing good stuff? Can we bring in some interactive stuff? Can we bring in some infographics? Is there stuff that we create that can help to give that broader context as well?
Yeah, because it's, you mentioned it, it is really hard to find and surface some of those stories and some of that content, because it either it doesn't exist, or it's been buried deep in, page 30 of the kind of Google results, and you have to click through for ages to even get something. And it's how we continue to surface those stories and how we continue to present them. And if that's us creating as opposed to curating, which we are committed to also doing, but it's so vitally important. We put a ton of time and effort into that. And it also starts even kind of before that, which is in how we put our team together. So at one point we knew we had a team of mostly white women who are in their 30s and 40s. That doesn't bring diversity of perspective.
No, it does not.
They'll be looking at a different and wide range of resources, and sources, but it's not diverse. We need diversity of age, diversity of kind of country, geographic region, all of those things, experience.
And we're getting there, aren't we?
We have a commitment of 50% diversity, which is just the start. I think it needs to be more than that in the longer term, but it's something that we have to work really hard at, because it is a core part of the product and what we're aiming to present for learners at Omnis.
Because I think we definitely recognize that in order to have that diversity of perspectives, you need to have that within the team that's curating them as well. And we also think about who are our learners, because our learners will have diverse perspectives as well. How can we make the content that we create relevant to them wherever they're starting from, and give them more and better, that is to say, varied and not just Western centric perspectives on the world, so they can decide what works for them, so they can chart their own paths through the material and have access to all the perspectives.
Yeah.
And
we've got this is a good point at which to promote our quest, Sharon, that is coming up.
It is, Lea.
You're going to have to correct me on the specific wording and the name, because it's quite long and I forget it all the time. But it's something along the lines of racism, everything you ever wanted to know but were afraid to ask.
It is something like that, for sure. And that builds on a lot of work that we have done on anti-racism over the last year and a half. And it starts in March.
It starts in March. Is it this week commencing the 7th, I think? And
I believe it is.
It isn't currently quite available to sign up for, but it will be available for non-members of Omnis to sign up to. So you can just sign up to the 8-week quest if you would like to, and it will be you and I facilitating. No questions. We have already got a whole bank of questions to answer. I think one of the important things that is that people feel comfortable asking those questions. And we had a guest expert a few weeks ago who hosted a kind of one-off live quest, and one of the questions she got from one of the younger kids was, "What is racism?"
Yes,
we cover basic questions that we assume that people know, and they don't. And I come up against so many people all the time in kind of my daily life who actually don't have a solid understanding of what racism looks like in reality. They think it's these kind of big things and these big offensive actions, and it's a lot more than that. So we cover all of those things and a whole lot more.
We do. There are a lot of questions, and we're always open to more questions. So if you have questions about racism, feel free to drop them in the comments, and we can add them to our list so that the quest can be even richer.
We will. I will put a link for people to sign up to that when it's ready. I've just moved house and it's not quite ready yet, but it will be.
Yes, and of course, the other question that we ask is, how can we include the voices of historically and currently excluded and underrepresented people?
Yeah.
Right. So even when it's, one of the things that I love about Omnis is we don't just say, oh, we're only going to feature Black and brown people when we're talking about racism. We feature people from all backgrounds talking about everything that they could possibly be interested in, right? We look for those varied perspectives on everything. If we find an Aboriginal man talking about investment, we're happy to include it, Yeah. And it's very, very important to us to do that.
We've got, our goal is 50% diversity of all kinds across the team. And we have an excellent person leading our maths club at the moment who is from the US, identifies as brown, is a member of the LGBTQ community. We have many people as part of our team who tick lots of boxes of intersectionality, including myself. And that's, we're always looking for that diverse perspective because it brings so much to our learners who are also diverse in their own individual ways. And when they see themselves represented and people see themselves represented from the people that they learn with and from, it makes such a difference.
It does. It really does. I think it's really, really important. It's great to have resources and to help create resources where it's not the same old faces and voices and perspectives, So
Yeah.
yes, decolonizing education is really important for creating well-rounded citizens who are individuals who have have a much broader vision of the world based on all the stories, not just part of the stories. It's about creating an equitable learning environment. It's about letting people decide what learning looks like for them as they navigate through the diverse perspectives and not following those outdated models based on colonialism. And I think the last thing that I would like to say about it is it's about preparing learners to be the best they can be and adapt to a rapidly changing world.
Yeah, it's so important. Look at what's happened with technology, but look at what's happened since George Floyd and look at the movements that have been created. And, the only constant is change.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Sharon. I think it's such an important topic and it's why we're so committed to it at Omnis. We will be back. I think Jenny will be back next week. Same time, same place, talking about, I'm just going to have to look, see what the topic is for next week. What's new in March? So what will be coming up at Omnis in March? We've got some amazing quests, including the racism quest, but we've got something, we've got Strong Girls for Strong Girls. We've got, I think, dragons and unicorns. We've got some really cool stuff coming up. So if you'd like to hear what's coming up at Omnis in March, do join Jenny next week at the same time, Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern.